It is Indiana in the Morning, presented, as always, by First Commonwealth Bank here on AM 1160 WCCS and 101.1 FM. And our interview with Bruce Feiler, the author of The First Love Story, Adam, Eve, and Us, is presented by Bradley Books in the Indiana Mall. Let's say good morning to Bruce Feiler. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you on the air, and especially at this time of the year as we look forward to Resurrection Sunday. And we talk about the very first love story, and that's an interesting way to phrase it. I don't think people would regard the story of Adam and Eve as a love story, but you certainly set the record straight on that. It really is, isn't it?
It's a story of success, of resilience, of missteps and backtracks, but ultimately of sticking with it through the long haul. I mean, they begin together, they separate, they come back together, they get kicked out of Eden, they stay together, God blesses them with children. That doesn't work out so well. God blesses them with the third child, and God needs them to succeed. It is a success. The problem is that basically organized religion kind of weaponized this story to hold down women and elevate men. And what's been happening now, as men and women have kind of re-equalized in society, and especially in religion, is people have gone back and kind of reclaimed and reimagined this story so that we can see it today as the love story that it's been all along.
One of the things that impresses me so much about your book is, and again, we're talking with Bruce Feiler, the author of The First Love Story, Adam, Eve, and Us, is the fact that you don't have to have a very deep knowledge of the creation story in order to appreciate what you're saying, and also in order to see how the culture has sort of corrupted that story and then to be set straight upon it. That's, to me, one of the great achievements of your book.
Well, thank you very much. Look, for me, the process begins at my kitchen table. I have a working wife. I have adolescent daughters. That means I spend a lot of time talking about the changing way men and women are relating to each other. And as someone who spent 20 years around the Bible with Walking the Bible, my book, and the PBS series, and written now 4 books about the Bible, this is my 5th, I keep thinking there must be some wisdom from the past that can help us with these struggles. And so we're in the Sistine Chapel a few years ago, and I look up with my daughters, and I'm looking at Adam and Eve, and I realize, oh my gosh, this story has been at the heart of every conversation about relationships for 3,000 years. Like, maybe it can tell us something, but where am I going to go, right? In Walking the Bible, I cross the Red Sea and taste manna and all that. But with this story, I get to go on this, I think of it as like this incredible scavenger hunt through time and history to Iraq, to Jerusalem, to Rome, to London, to Hollywood, and see how this story has evolved over time, and we've come to see it for, as I said, like the great success between the first man and the first woman that really it has been all along. We just never saw it that way.
One of the amazing things about it is that trip and the way that you describe your visit to the Sistine Chapel when you're there. It's just you. It's not what you typically get on a visit there, which is a huge crowd of people. Gaining access to the Sistine Chapel is a triumph in itself, but then that gives you a chance to experience it in a way that very few people do.
That was such a hoot, and of course, as you know, I went back the next morning. So twice I got in by myself, and you notice that there's a floor, by the way, because you don't normally see the floor with all the people. But you look up at the ceiling, and Michelangelo. Everybody had been told for centuries that Adam, that this is a story about God and Adam and Eve, the second-class citizen. And Michelangelo does more than anybody, because that image of Adam and God with the fingers, that's not the most important image, which is, of course, what we all think, what I thought. It's the next image. That the exact center of the room is Eve, not Adam and not God. And Michelangelo does more to kind of resuscitate Eve from the scapegoating that she experienced for the first 1,500 years than anybody, and sort of opens the door to the idea that they are equal and ultimately that they can be seen as being in love.
Why is it important for those of us who have had this view down through the years, and we do, frankly, we look at this story and we have learned it in a certain way. Why is it important for us to change the way that we perceive the story of Adam and Eve?
So I was giving a speech the other day in front of 500 people. It was about half men, half women, and I got to the point in my speech where I said that Adam and Eve, but especially Eve, are victims of the greatest character assassination the world has ever known. And spontaneously, the women in the audience started hooting and hollering, kind of like full Monty almost. And what I realized is this matters because, you and I are having this conversation, right? All across Western Pennsylvania, people are struggling in their work lives, in their parenting, in their marriages, in their relationships, their dating, whatever, to figure out how men and women can live in our changing times. And it matters that we see them as doing the same thing and that we see them as a success, not as a failure, because relationships are commodified these days, right? We've got reality television and tabloids and all that kind of stuff. And it matters that our first relationship be a success, not a failure. And so that's why I've seen women's groups, book groups, Bible study groups, couples groups. I have a discussion guide, as you know, on brucefeiler.com of how to use this story to improve your own relationship. It matters because it shows that we've been doing this for 3,000 years, and it kind of gives us comfort, and I actually think a lot of tips and guidance for how to do it more successfully.
Bruce Feiler is our guest. The book is The First Love Story, Adam, Eve, and Us, and our interview today brought to you by Bradley Books in the Indiana Mall. Bruce, for just a few moments, you met with so many amazing people, wonderful archaeologists and psychologists and Bible scholars. I'm sure some of them opened your eyes to possibilities you hadn't even considered when you got into this topic. What were some of the more eye-opening things that you learned as you researched this book?
Well, that's a great question, and really it's the road trip here that's so fun, and it's just so fun to people to go to all these places you've read about and imagined your whole life. But let's just take the first two that you mentioned, because you just gave me that list, archaeologists and psychologists, okay? So I write a lot about in my New York Times column and elsewhere, modern psychology, the positive psychology, right, the happiness movement. What's the first thing that we've learned from this is that relationships are important to us. Like relationships give us meaning and make us feel better. Connection is really important. What's the opposite of that? Loneliness. Loneliness is the big threat. So we have the opioid crisis, the suicide crisis, and on things like that. What is the first thing that the Bible says? What's the first thing that God says about human beings in the Bible? It's not right for human beings to be alone. God looks at Adam by himself and realizes he needs a companion. He needs a partner. Ultimately, it becomes Eve. The Bible gets there 3,000 years before modern social science. So there's a lot of people who say, science has rendered the Bible irrelevant. Well, here's a beautiful example where that's not true. Mm-hmm. A lot of people say, all you need is the Bible. You don't need modern science. Another example where that's not true. To me, you put the past and the present in dialogue, you put the Bible in conversation with modern science, you're going to get insights and illumination and excitement and kind of relevance that's kind of mind-blowing and, to me, just delightful.
The story comes at you in layers, doesn't it, when you read the creation story and then you understand it in a new light. It just comes back at you again and again and again. It's amazing to me.
Well, that's exactly right, and this is what happened. I mean, every time I read it, I see something new. I mean, my wife, really, God knows she read 3 or 4 drafts of this book, and here she is, as I've been talking about the first love story in the media, just saying, I just love hearing you talk about the moment where after Adam and Eve leave Eden, they have Cain and Abel, Cain murders Abel. They could break apart. The whole story could end. We all think losing a child is bad for a relationship, yet they survive. And I, got to go see Hamilton. And there's a moment in Hamilton, to me the best moment in Hamilton, where Alexander and Eliza are estranged. He's had an affair. They lose their child in a duel. And they sing this song called It's Quiet Uptown. And it ends with forgiveness. Like, can you imagine? And, that's what Adam and Eve do, and I never saw that. And the idea that they might forgive each other, like they're the first to realize, oh my gosh, you're in pain and I'm in pain, and we could end the whole thing here. The Bible won't even get going. Mm-hmm. But we forgive each other, and we use imagination, right, to imagine a new future even after the pain. What the psychologist, I spoke to the woman who studied what losing a child does to a relationship, and she said, you write a new chapter in your life story together. What a beautiful idea for anybody listening to us who's had pain, who may have suffered or lost a job or lost a parent or whatever it is. You write a new story together. That's a lesson for all of us.
And, of course, a part of this at this time of the year it is always the resurrection story of Christ, and that speaks to the whole idea of restoration to our Adamic state, our Adam and Eve state.
Well, again, pain, healing, rupture, mending, right? Sin, redemption. It's all there, in winter to spring. I mean, why are Passover and Easter at this time of year? Because it's the time of renewal and reclaiming and reimagining. I mean, that the Passover and Easter used to be at different times of year. They moved them, in effect, to take advantage. And so many of the symbols, eggs, are about new life. This time of year, who among us, certainly I've been married almost 15 years, who among us can't use a little renewal in our relationship? And Adam and Eve really paved the road, and they had no one to model on. They were making it up as they went along, so that makes it even more impressive. They couldn't go to couples counseling. They had to figure it out.
Bruce Feiler, the author of The First Love Story, Adam, Eve, and Us. You mentioned this is the fifth book, and the journeys that you have taken have been amazing. Tell me about the recovery process from you when you have finally put one to bed, and even after you get through the season that you're in right now, the promotion of the book. How long does it take you to build up the energy for the next one, or are you one of those continually work on a new one types of guys?
Well, I mean, I have. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. This is my 13th book. The last 6 have been New York Times bestsellers. So I'm just one of these people. I actually kind of enjoy all parts of the process. I enjoy the conception. In this case, what can Adam and Eve tell us about modern relationships? I enjoy the reading. There's like a year of reading. There's a year of traveling, off and on. I'm a parent and I'm a husband, so I got to be home. But there's a year of traveling, and then there's this period of talking about it. And to me, it's a privilege, right? It's a privilege to come on to talk to you, to share this story with people, and to see people responding. And by the way, people are embracing this. Some people are giving me a little hate mail, but that part of it. And yes, at the end of it, you're kind of like depleted and like, oh my gosh, I'll never write again. Like I'm spent. But there'll be renewal. It will come back, and sooner or later, if I'm lucky, another story that I'm excited about will say, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the next 3 years.
The stories cry out to you. BruceFeiler.com. Feiler is spelled Feiler. BruceFeiler.com, and I'm sure that's where we'll get the first hint of what you're working on anew.
You can follow me on social media. You can sign up for my newsletter. We all connect in so many different ways now, and frankly, this story is a story of connection, and that to me is the lesson that's most powerful of all. We live in this kind of hyper-connected world, and yet we have a crisis of connection. It seems crazy, but yet everybody says, I don't feel connected to people because I'm just staring at Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat all the time.
Well, we are staring at your book right now. Even as I speak, I'm looking at it and have enjoyed it so much. Bruce Feiler, thank you so much for spending some time with us here in Indiana in the Morning.
Thank you so much, and come on this journey, folks. In the time of hate, I think we all need a little love, and I think you'll be uplifted.